Okay, hold on just a couple more moments. And popping out the chat. And then, boom. There I am. So, welcome back. For those of you watching on YouTube after the fact, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, and this is a cat named Carlton, who has decided to join me the second I start talking. And the Anycubic Photon is amazing for making miniatures. Now, hey, Fuzzbutt. Yeah. No. Hey. Fireball. Camera whore. Yeah, you are, you little buddy. Alright, scoot down. Let go. Get on down, Fuzzbutt. Go. Okay. Now, originally I had planned to do a second broadcast to resculpt the dwarf that I had done last week for a patron. But I realized it would probably not be a good idea simply because I've already given one video on the subject. So I'm going to sculpt it in private. Just, when I have a chance, I'm just going to go ahead and sculpt it. And then tonight, however, we're going to finish the Odiug we started back on Thursday. This is going to be for everyone. It's going to end up on Thingiverse, not the Patreon file vault. And hello, Mark. Now, I'd like to say that one thing I did before tonight's broadcast, I experimented with using the Z-Sphere rig. Yeah. I experimented with using the Z-Sphere rig to pose the Odiug and got some really, really, really bad results. So, I went ahead and instead did what I normally do and took it into Daz Studio and rigged it at a low poly. We're talking, if I click here, I go to parameters, all, and like say side to side, bend, rear. Okay. And so to add the details, I'm going to make a high definition morph. Currently, it has a potential subdivisions levels of 3. Right now, there is no morph on it because I'm going to be making that tonight. Let's drop that back down to 0. And we're going over to ZBrush. And we're going to import Pre-Sculpt Minis, Broadcast Minis, new Odiug, and Odiug HD. And it's loading, as you can see up here. There we go. Frame. And we're going to do most of it mirrored until we get down the center line of the critter. Because doing it down the center line will make it very clearly mirrored, whereas if we avoid that, we can add some details and that really disguise the fact that we did the rest of it mirrored. Now, as you can see up top and over here, the full high-res version for the morph is 2.5 million polygons. We cannot change that while we are making this morph, because if we did, then it wouldn't be able to load back in. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to Clay Buildup. We're going to change that square back to the alpha 01, and we're going to shrink it a bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this and we're going to kind of trace over the muscle groups that reach the skin. Just kind of And all we're doing is we're just giving it just some surface, just texture. And then we're going to kind of come up this way. And one of the cats just fell out of the window. Silly kitty. Now, we're going to kind of draw down like this. This is not going to be much in terms of the actual texture on the figure. This is more to get it'll give an impression more than anything else. Okay. Now, it might show up in the final high res, but it will be considerably different from what we're seeing right now. Now, we're going to follow along this. This is one of the few areas where we're going to go ahead and just do the let the mirror go. Simply because, like I said, this is more of for impressions, not for the actual geometry involved. And then come around like this. And then down. And this is the butt. And what would be the back muscles down here. And yes, there's a bit of a tail, wrinkly bit. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to just kind of loop like this. And then down the back. And we're going to kind of bring these up like this. Like I said, this is all mostly just for impression rather than for actual detail. It'll also help give us some lines to use as reference while we're working when it comes time to actually start adding in some of these weirdisms. Because this is a weird critter. Okay, now we're going to make this a little bit bigger and a little bit more intense. And we're going to start drawing counterpoint lines to these muscles. But not so much for the muscles themselves, but they're going to kind of follow the general shape and direction of the limbs. We're going to do the same thing around here. Oh. Note the self-start the stroke on the figure. Once again, this helps us develop a look for the critter. And the look that we want is pretty much revoltingly, disgustingly fleshy. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing around the neck, down the back, there, and around the leg. Okay. And then just some around. It looks like I'm deliberately spinning the sucker, and I'm not. Okay. So we have our basic, just kind of wrinkly, grobbly bits. This is just to give it some weird look. Okay. Now we're going to switch to the slash tool. There it is. Once again, turn off lazy mouse. We're going to drop that down considerably. About 12. Make it a little bit bigger. And what we're going to do is we're going to start kind of tracing some of the things we need to make sure get emphasized, like the jaw. And then kind of very lightly go over and under some of these other muscle groups. Just again to kind of emphasize it. And then okay, and then down here. Now there we go. And there we go. Let's do some along the back here. And underneath the tail. There we go. Frame out, and it's looking pretty good so far. But we now have to add in all of the, now that we get into the actual real details more than just the shaping. Okay. So what are y'all thinking so far of Mr. O.T. Yug? One of the things we're going to do is we're going to redefine those, or more sharply define those eyes. We're going to shrink the mouse quite a bit. And we're going to kind of make it sure it goes deep. And then here. Oh. Make sure we're following the actual ridge and not digging in a second one. This can be kind of difficult. And then number one. Yeah. Now, the spikes, now that I'm looking at them, probably need to get swollen. They need to get swole! What I'm going to do is I'm going to make them a little bit thicker so that they're easier to print. And they'll also look less likely to break off inside you. and more likely to tear chunks off of you. There we go. That looks a lot more intimidating and a lot easier to print. Now we're going to add some warts. And how we're going to do that, we're going to use the layer tool. And we're going to change the brush Alpha 48. Alpha 48 is at 100% intensity, comes out as, and drag dot comes out as a perfect hemisphere on top of your item. So we're going to use that. We're going to turn off X because we want the warts to be a little bit more random. We're going to play around with adding these warts to various spots. There we go. The great thing about drag dot is it literally lets you drag the dots to wherever you want them. That's the whole point of it. And we need to add a couple more up there. These little warts. There we go. That's some warts for it. Now we need to add in some wrinkly bits. For that we're going to go back to slash, but we're going to go to add, drop it down, and increase the size quite a bit. And we're going to follow some of the lines that we drew in earlier to get some of these wrinkles. Alright, we need to make them a little bit bigger. A little bit deeper. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and turn X back on because we're going to do this on the legs. We're going to follow along the muscle lines just to kind of draw lines of tension. And then we're going to make sure to follow it on the tops of these bits here. Alright. Okay, and then here, a couple down. And we're going to add in, actually, let's turn off X. I'm going to add in some this way. and this way. Now, frame out again. He's already looking kind of, got an interesting skin texture to him, but we're going to add one more little thing. We're going back to clay buildup. We're going to increase the intensity quite a bit and shrink it. We're also going to change the brush. We're going to change the alpha to... Oh, it's under meshes. Comb brush alpha. So, let's see how this works. Okay, no. What we're going to do is we're going to shrink it down again, and we're going to add in wrinkles where wrinkles would be in the skin. Okay, those didn't get... I forgot to do the X, so... Let's undo those. Bring it back on. Okay. And then let's go ahead and give some in the in here. And a little bit down the back of this. X. And okay. Okay. Frame out. Okay, I'm pretty certain this is all we really need for surface details on an ODUG, except we need to make sure that we emphasize the toenails. So let's shrink this down, and we're going to mark off the toenails for the hooves. And okay, that's way too big. It changes too much. Let's shrink this, and then let's get this over to here and draw it down like that. And then we're gonna come up that way, come up that way, come up that way. And there's only going to be 2 toes on this hoof. Okay. Now, the last thing we're going to do before we go to further detailing, we're going to inflate around the toes to show that they're kind of like bulging out where they meet those nails. Okay, and then back here we're going to do the same thing. Bulge out around the toenails. And then polish 100% larger. We're going to kind of, whoop. Let's make this a little bit smaller. We're just going to kind of sit here and jag up the toenails. And then we're going to completely flatten out the bottom of them. And the reason for this is so that tends to look a little bit more like a different texture, not as much like skin. And then just enough to give it some interesting look. Okay, now this is just a morph. And to prove that, we're going to go ahead and export this back into our ODUG folder, and still as ODUG HD, save on top of itself. Yes. He's gonna steal more than your lunch money. Alright, so we're now going back to here. And now, this button here, I can import the HD morph. We don't want there. We want free sculpt, broadcast, new, ODUG HD. Reverse deformations, yes, just in case. Property group, create HD. Delta tolerance 0.0001. And then morph subdivision, yes. Build resolution 1. Oh, no. Not 1, 3. Let's start with that one so I don't forget. Yes. 3. 0. Create HD. And yes. There we go. That should do it. And there we go. Okay, that worked. Now, let's go ahead and go back to the parameters. We go down to HD and set that minimum to 0. And now we're going to save the morph in case I ever want to do another ODUG. Support asset. Morph assets. Miniatures. And that's the ODUG HD, accept. Okay, now to show you what it looks like on the low-res version. It still looks kind of, it made it a little bit thicker and it looks kind of lumpy, but it thickened out those spikes nicely. Now we go back up to general, mesh resolution, and we change it from 0 to 3. And there we go. This is our Odiug. You'll notice it's slowing down and I probably sound like a robot as I rotate it. So, can anyone guess what the next step is? What is the next thing we are going to do with this Odiug? No! It is not going to be the base yet. Oh, that's good to hear, David. Ding, 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 ding. TJ Henry got it. We're going to pose it. After all, if it's just standing there like that, it's incredibly boring. So what we're going to do, we're going to have to figure out what we want it to do. My first thought is, let's see what happens if we take this back leg. Oh. Okay. And then let's go to this collar here. We're going to bend it back. No. Okay. Like it's running is what we want to try and do here. Let's go to a right view, because what we need to do now is we need to Alright, so let's go back to that right view, because that gives us good sight. Okay, what we need to do is we need to bend that a bit more there. But we're going to go to this collar, we're going to side to side a negative amount, and then side to side that leg, and twist it like that. Okay, no, that doesn't look good. Alright, let's kind of bend that just a bit. We're going to unbend that just a bit, because it's going to be resting on that toe. Most of the mass is going to be along the line between, balanced across the line between those 2 feet. So it looks like it's running towards something. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select those 3. We're going to bend it forward. Oh, bend it forward. Then select those three and bend it backwards. Then we're going to go ahead and select everything except for the top, and we're going to twist over there, but we're going to side to side that way. Now the tip we're going to twist back around and bend. Yeah, the middle we're going to twist also. And the bottom we're going to twist. Okay, so it's just kind of going. Argh! Now, this whole tentacle here, this part is going to bend forward. We need the Y. And let's and we're going to twist that a little bit more. So basically the idea is that the arm that's going forward, that tentacle goes back. The tentacle that's going forward, or the arm that's going forward, the tentacle goes back. Okay, and then let's go ahead and just expand from selected. Okay. There we have, and let's actually, one other thing I mentioned. Let's make that maw a bit more fearsome. Okay. Now, how does it look with the full resolution? There we go. It looks kind of chubby, kind of shaggy, and kind of dirty. This is exactly the look we want for our Odiug. Okay, let's drop that back down to 0 just for right now, because the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and place in a base. File, import, bases. Let's go ahead and make it rock, because most of them tend to live underground. Now, you'll notice that base is a little small. So what we're going to do, you're just going to do your generic scale 200%. So that's the size for a size large critter. Now, I'm going to move it to there. Front view, we're going to lower it. And there we have, actually, 233. There we go, it's a bit better. And let's bring that back just a little bit to make sure it's going to cover the mass of the critter. Now, we're going to take our Odiug, we're going to drop it up to 3. Okay. Now we're going to hide it. And I'm going to do some math real quick. Let's break out that calculator. Okay. 60 millimeter divided by 25 equals 2.4. Okay, so that base needs to be 240. Y scale 240. No, Y scale of 200. Z scale of 240. Make sure. Okay, good. We hide the base. With this at full high resolution, file, export, pre. Oh, I accidentally put in a slash by accident. ODUG pre. And it's going to write it out at 2.555 million polygons. Now we're going to hide it, make the base visible. File, export, OTUG base. Accept, and we go to ZBrush. Now, we have a subtool. We're going to import ODUG pre. Take a few moments up here on the orange bar, and there we go. Now we're going to append, and this is going to be import ODUG base. It's really dynamic looking. I really like how the pose came out. This is an ODUG, but it doesn't look like the old sedentary pile of tentacles flopping on three stumpy legs from the first edition monster manual. They sure don't. So we go down to merge, and we're going to merge down. And then geometry, Dynamesh. We're going to Dynamesh 1024. Dynamesh. It's not 1.533 million polygons. Okay. So let's go ahead and open up Decimation Master. Let's see what it looks like at 75,000 points, 150,000 triangles. And writing file to disk, reading go Z. And at 150,000 triangles, I don't know about you, but I'm having a hard time seeing if there's any details that didn't come out well. Okay. So, let's go ahead and export this out as OTUG miniature. Now, since this is not for sale, this is going to be on Thingiverse, I can call it an ODUG. And this is our final. This is our final form. This right here, that's the screenshot to make the thumbnail from. I'm going to hit, just for the heck of it, I'm going to hit print screen and start up Photoshop just to save this. Size the clipboard, okay, at RGB. Yeah, there we go. Now, I'm going to pull this up just so I can make sure to hide my... Yeah, I'll worry about that later. Now, so what did y'all think of it? Okay, I'm going to have to refresh here because I had a logging problem. Okay. Because I did it with that morph, that means I could literally make any number of ODUGs I want. That will all just pose, export, put a base under it, dynamesh it together to one solid surface, and then decimate, and I've got my ODUG. At one point, I was sorely tempted to have the ODUG rising up on its back leg. So, a dabbing ODUG. Yeah. Dabby-ug. Yeah. And let me grab another soda. And before anyone asks, yes, I drink room temperature sodas. I know it's an abomination to some people, but that's what I got used to. So that's how I drink them. Put this in the trash. Oh, there's a new one. Okay. It didn't take very long to do the detailing. It's not quite like I thought it was going to. Since it's mostly really just kind of flabby, wrinkly, warty skin, most of the detailing would actually come from shading. Which brings a point. If you do decide to paint the ODUG, print and paint it, this particular technical paint, or texture paint from Citadel, cake it on the feet and up the shins, both the front and back, because what it is, it's mud that gives like that dirty, filthy look, and it will build up on the like a rough sandy texture look to it, and then you could like dry brush it for some further detailing, so you can have it look like it's been running through poo or whatever it runs through. These actually taste better than the regular Cheetos. I don't know why. Today they were on sale. Anyway, that was a really short sculpt tonight, wasn't it? So I guess what the next thing we do is any questions on painting or... Just to show you, I got a little bit more done on the faces on these guys. Oh, come on. A little bit more done on his face. He's got the tinting on the cheeks and the nose and the lip and the chin. The tinting isn't needed, it just gives a bit more visual interest to the face. I still have a lot left to do. I haven't had the chance because various things have been happening. So anyway, do y'all have any questions? Hi, Lagash. Y'all have any questions on the sculpting or painting? The latest addition to the Green Tide is a lot of unsculpted on arms and torsos and legs. I still have to actually add the details. As for the current status of the Green Tide, $6,401. Gonna sound odd, but thankfully no one backed a partial number this time up, like a $21.50 or 32 cents. I had like one or two backers on the Titans that backed it by like 1 or 2 cents just to say, I support you, but I can't afford it. That would be difficult because the hands are solid, fused. What I am going... Also, a Warhorn is held like that, not like that. It's a totally... It wouldn't look right at all. Yeah. Not that, which is a sword. It's almost the opposite hand. What I'm going to be adding, at least on the orc side, is some arms with... On the left, you've got 2 arms that are mostly straight and 2 arms that are mostly bent with just a fist. That's for the shields. But for those people who want to add their own weapons, guns, you could easily just stick the gun on top there. Make a mirrored version. Oh! You'd said you had said one that can push in the hands and arms I already have. I can make extra bits that you can glue on. I'm thinking that I probably won't have the time unless we get the 12,000 mark. At that point, I can throw them in while I'm working on the siege machines. And here comes... Yep, got a little fur ball here. Oh. There you go. Thankfully, this guy doesn't interrupt me when I've got the tablet in my lap. Do you? Now, my plan is, since we made the gobos, I'm also going to be throwing in drummer, horn blower, and a banner bearer, or at least arms, for both the orcs and the gobos. Not quite. I have one hand holding the drum. There's an archery hand back here, having just released. And with the gobos, their entire torso and arms are one piece. So it wouldn't be hard to have the drums here and, separate head in there and sit in them. Anyway. Yes. I've made arms holding the banner. In fact, let me go ahead and import something real quick. Where did I put them? There we go. Where did I put them? Oh yeah, here they are. No. I sculpted them somewhere. Here we go. Just as an example, let me go ahead and pop over to here. Here is the heavy armor arm holding that banner. And yes, there's a little bit of gore underneath that head. Yes, that is a giant's head, with bits of the skull visible as the head's rotting away. And the armor for the bearer. So yeah, they can hold it. Honestly, for patterns on the banner, one thing to remember is that orcs are crude. Use an old brush that's like this and just slap it on before you shade it, because that would be similar to how just a orc would have like a 3-inch paintbrush and go orky. If you want more advanced orcs, well, as for patterns to paint on them, if you Google image search orc banner or Warhammer orc banner, you'll see pages from old issues of Games Workshop magazines and old orc army lists that actually have sample banners. I also kinda cheated on the cloth, in that I used a cloth sim on a single wall construction, and then gave it thickness. Ugh. Do you have to? Yes, you do have to. Oh. I have no idea what you mean by that, Largash. A constellation of some of your bodies and weapons? Okay. Hmm. An armory. I would rather not. Among other things, a lot of the weapons are part of the files that my patrons get at the Master tier. They gain the files to use Daz Studio to make their own miniatures with. So I'd rather not just have them just out there. So... Oh. Like a cart. Basically, supply wagon. Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Okay. First of all, during battles, never. So you never want your baggage train near the front of the battle at all. Old editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, like the 3rd edition, 2nd edition, 4th edition, had rules for a baggage train. At the center back of your deployment zone, you would put your baggage train. It had no game effect except if the enemy got to it and destroyed it, it was further victory points for them. So it was possible for someone to lose more troops, but destroy the enemy baggage train and still win. But yeah, you never want your baggage train anywhere near the battle. Too valuable and too disastrous if lost. Yeah.
He's on fire.
Oh!
I'm on fire.
But yeah, having your resupply anywhere near the front of the battle is bad. Archers who use up their arrows in a battle fall back and are replaced by other archers. There are runners who will bring arrows from the baggage train all the way up to front lines and start handing out stacks of arrows to resupply, but the baggage train is nowhere near the battle itself, and it's way outside of any weapon range. Ooh, most common orc item, object, or equipment. Or troop type. Yurt. The way I see it, orcs are not build a permanent village types. They're nomadic. So they would have a yurt rather than a hut. Yurts. Yurts are just a form of tent. Just a really, really, really unique form. But for the individual, I can't think of anything I see as being orky that they don't have yet. Game of Thrones. I tried to read the first book when it came out in 84 or 85, one of the two. The first 3 chapters are as dry as the list of so-and-so begot so-and-so who begot so-and-so in the King James Bible. The books are horrible. Haven't seen the TV show. I can think of a laundry list of books I would rather see be turned into a long-running TV show than Game of Thrones. Yes. The first 3 chapters of the first book of Game of Thrones is almost as bad as the Silmarillion for being dry. I would rather see books by David Eddings, like the Belgariad, Malorion, Elenium, and Tumuli, be turned into long-running series. I do not want to see Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time drags on. Never heard of him. Mm-mm. Ooh. Yep, I really don't like the Wheel of Time. Mm-mm. Okay, go ahead and post it. But anyway. Let me go ahead and I'm putting some e-liquid on my device. Hmm. Ah, the way you wrote it originally sounded more like the mighty whitey trope. Anyway, so it is 9:12. It's pretty early for right now. Of course, it's a chieftain. Hmm. Oh, hold on just a second. Okay, I'm back. The thing is, I don't like Westerns. I do not like Westerns. Might seem like fantasy from a European point of view, but it's a Western. I don't like it. So... Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, it's just not my thing. Well, I guess we can discuss what will happen on the Tuesday show. Um, hmm. The main reason why I did the Odiug. But yeah, like, if Ivanhoe counts as fantasy, it was the first fantasy book I read. If it doesn't, A Wrinkle in Time. After that, I read all of the Narnia series, and I hated The Last Battle. Because of what they did to Susan. There was literally no reason for it, except to say, look, some people just fail. So is there anyone except Largash got any conversational subjects for the next 45 minutes? Anyone? Because we're going to lose people if it's just me and Largash talking. We need more people interacting to try and keep the number of people we have watching. Because we're veering very far away. Miniatures, gaming. That's what we need to focus on. Well, just, give me just a second. Okay. All right. I don't understand that question. How about this? Let me take control. Moment. There's a miniatures game that was far ahead of its time and died with the death of Fossa that I wish was still around, called Vor. Vor the Maelstrom. That would be Vor the Maelstrom was a tabletop miniatures game in like 98, 99. At the time, Games Workshop was the Warhammer games and all that were geared towards large armies. Vor was geared towards small ones. If you were Neo-Soviets, which tended to have the most, the largest armies because of a lot of conscript troops, you'd probably have 20 or 30 troops. Look and wanted me of a character. 2, I'm trying to talk about an old game. Tabletop minis in keeping with the theme that I wish was still around. Now, Vor the Maelstrom. See, Largash, I can't focus on you. I will lose everyone. Because I can't do all of my conversation in the chat. I've got to do it live, talking to everyone that will be watching this video. And it takes way too much time to type everything. I'm sorry. And I have not been able to get the automatic subtitles to work. So I'm sorry. I don't want to sound mean, but I can't focus my entire channel to you. I've got to focus to the largest group. Now, Vor the Maelstrom was a tabletop game that came out in about 98-99 by FASA. And the concept was an interdimensional vortex that would suck in worlds from other universes. And they would orbit the central maw until finally no more. So every sapient race on these worlds was racing to go from their world to the next outer world, and then trying to get out to the outside and trying to find some way out of the maelstrom. And yes, Earth got sucked in. It's not abandonware because the man who owns the copyrights is still trying to find a publisher. One of the key things it had was it was built around the idea that you could have an army of anything. There were rules in the rulebook for custom forces. You could make your own army. So, the last book that was being worked on before FASA died would have made this game immortal. An entire supplement for custom forces. The default races already were pretty varied. I mean, you had the Union, which is take the U.S. military and add about a century more of development. There was the Neo-Soviets, who were chemical warfare, cybernetics, and conscript troops. You had the Shard, who were super powerful crystalline beings that manipulated energy. You had, I can't remember their name, Vicree or something. They were tall, skinny humanoids with triple-jointed arms and legs. Yes, triple-jointed arms. That were kind of mystic martial artists. You had, pseudo-Egyptian undead aliens with laser guns. Kind of like if the Necron were actually undead instead of robots. And then you had the Growlers. Imagine 20-foot-tall hybrids of gorilla and T-Rex with metallic skeletons and the ability to eat almost anything. That was the Growlers. There were others that never really got any kind of serious force books. Like, there was a race that was basically 5-foot-tall, massively muscled blue guys with dreadlocks and motorcycles and jet cycles. Golems, who were these little guys piloting 8-foot-tall bodysuits. And there was a few others out there. But what I miss about it is that custom forces rule. We had somebody that made an entire army based on a fantasy world, where instead of, troops carrying guns, they had wizards that instead of shooting guns were casting firebolts. We had a guy who made an entire army based on superheroes. An entire army based on superheroes. And this army, it was very few numbers, very tough individuals, and it always got flattened. Largash, there's rules for using orcs as army in almost every fantasy game. It's more the other way around. Build your orcs to fit your troop types that you've purchased in the game. Anyway, Vor had that background that let you play anything. And I really miss it. I wish the guy who has the copyrights all the luck in the world. The problem is, he missed his chance. He came out far too early. Skirmish games weren't really a big thing. And now that they are, it's too late. Because the skirmish games that are here, like War Machine and Hordes, like, all these skirmish tier games have pretty much filled their niches. There's really not going to be, it'll be seen as just another skirmish game. Whereas, if he had managed to find his backer 5 years back, Vor could have been the thing. There's other tabletop games that some were good, some weren't, for war games and miniatures. Just as an example, I believe it was Grenadier put out a war game with the idea of trying to overtake the market from Games Workshop, which at the time, Games Workshop and Warhammer Fantasy were at the time the only two real popular tabletop war games. This is like early 90s. And they had a box that included a whole lot of orc spearmen, a whole lot of orc archers, a whole lot of orc sword and shield. And then you had dwarven spearmen, dwarven axe and shield, and dwarven crossbowmen. But the rules were really weird. And really, really strange because, among other things, it wasn't turns, it was segments of 2 hours. And your game always ended at nightfall. And you rolled to see what time the battle started. 2 hours. It was strange. D&D had a war game. First edition first came out, Battle System. And it was so daggone complex, it was almost faster to handle all of the battles using the D&D system on a tabletop than it was to run that. Second edition, however, Battle System, was really quick, really fast, and was actually a really good game. But it never caught on. Because, well, a miniatures game like that needs to have a line of miniatures to support. It needs to have lore for the battles. I will not make a miniature that looks like me, because I can't make an exact replica by sculpting. It wouldn't look like me. Anyway. So, where are you going, little baby girl? Oh, you stopped for petting, so you're going to go eat. Anyway, anyone else have any tabletop war games you remember in that? Largash. Okay. Now, other tabletop war games that I've played. Besides the battle system, besides that, there used to be a battle system called a war game, about tabletop war game that was based around everyone had a can of Play-Doh. Yep. And you make your whatever creation, and everyone would decide. Like, if you had a ranged attack, you actually had to have some of your Play-Doh aside as ammunition and make little ammunition. And the smaller the ammunition, the less damage it did. But the more of it you had. The bigger your thing was, the tougher and all that, but the fewer special abilities. You got spines, okay, but if the spines on the model break, the spines on the character broke. It was really, really goofy, really intended for, like, one-shot con games. I agree, Mark. I would love to have a good 3D scanner, not something that uses your webcam. But let's see. There used to be a game. It was a wonderful tank simulator. I mentioned it before. Centurion from the Renegade Legion. Renegade Legion had one game system for out in space, one game system for the fighters, and one game system for tanks and infantry. And yes, they were interchangeable. As in, your fighters could interact with the tanks and the spaceships. I've seen 3D scanned miniatures, and usually that looks pretty bad. The only use for it is rough estimation of size and scale. You know, because you'd have to resculpt the details anyway, and the point cloud that generates is really, really, really bad. But other space games included... Look, Games Workshop has had a lot of minor miniature games. One of the ones, going back to space, is Battlefleet Gothic, which I don't know if they still have it on their site, but they had the actual rules for Battlefleet Gothic available for free download as PDF just a couple years ago, long after they had stopped making it. There's a game out now called Gaslands. Gaslands is taking little Hot Wheels cars, sticking guns on them, and blowing each other up. Which is exactly what Dark Future was from Games Workshop back in, I think it was the mid-90s. Don't you even think about it, Furball. Anyway, they've also had Necromunda, which was squad-based combat inside a hive city. They had Inquisitor, which was squad-based combat, but at 54mm scale figures. Hey, Shinji, come on. Good girl. Good girl. They've had a lot of Gorka Morka, which was you and another group racing each other, which meant that the board kept sliding back in new pieces, and shooting each other at the time, blowing each other up. A lot of these games had rules for campaign play. Like if this figure sustained an injury, he might lose a limb or lose points from his profile. Whereas if he got a lot of kills in a given game, he might get bonuses to his profile or a perk that gives him a bonus in a specific situation or something to that effect. There was a lot of them from Games Workshop, and they always let them run for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and then No more. No matter how popular they were, they dropped them. Space Hulk was one of the first examples of this. Ran it for a few years, then dropped it. Blood Bowl keeps coming back. A new Blood Bowl. A new Blood Bowl. Yeah. Legend of Five Rings tried to come up with a tabletop war game. The problem was, Legend of Five Rings' core setting is a hybrid of Legendary China and Legendary Japan. And contrary to what they thought, they don't really mix that well. China had a lot more metal, for one. And the Chinese armor and fighting styles and weapons are totally different from the Japanese fighting styles and armor and weapons and tactics. Yeah, Mordhan, that was another squad-based game where your individual characters would advance or weaken as time went on. But right now, there is an opening. There is a weakness in the gaming, tabletop war games. There is no large-scale fantasy. Nothing like War Master or Warhammer Fantasy. Every fantasy game out there right now is not traditional fantasy. It's unique. That includes Age of Sigmar. Yeah, they're Sigmarines. They're not Stormcast Eternals. They're Space Marines with fantasy. But there's room for a nice, decently written, commercial, large-scale fantasy war game that may or may not have cats. Ralph? What are you doing, Ralph? Besides purring. Yeah. What? Do you mind? Ralph? What are you doing? Well, they're trying to make a fantasy world that's identical to 40K. They're trying to capture lightning in a bottle twice. Do you mind? Ooga booga. Do you mind? Yeah. So instead of going to other planets and spaceships, they're traveling to different dimensions with rifts. You know? Anyway. Okay, Ralph, I'm putting you down on the floor. Down on the floor you go. Go on. Shoo. Shoo. Okay. There's other games that are popular nowadays besides the War Machine, Hordes, Warhammer, whether 40k or Age of Sigmar. There's Squad Leader. Not Squad Leader. There's a game out there, I can't remember the name, that's focused on 1940s tanks, or World War II tanks and infantry. There's a Star Wars game, fleet battles and fighter battles. Rumor has it there's a war game for Battlestar Galactica, which has the problem that there's only 3 kinds of Viper and only 4 kinds of Cylon Raider before they exhausted the source material. There was a space battle game for Space Battleship Yamato that was brought over here as Star Blazers. The game itself, the rules were a little arcane, but playable. But you had so many ships for each force that you could choose from to build your fleet. It was just using only the ones that were shown in the show. That's a huge number. But the production quality of the book was mediocre. It was that cheap printer paper stock, entirely black and white on the inside, no color illustrations of any kind. Very little fluff in the lists to explain what was this type of carrier, why was it used, why did this cruiser have this and not that. No fluff at all in the list of the ship types. And in general, it just didn't appeal to enough players to really get popular. Which is kind of a shame, because it could have been a great game. Then again, it was one of those games where if you had a ship with a wave motion gun, you drew a line from it straight ahead, and anything along its path went and half the Earth fleet had wave motion guns. Anyway. DreamPod 9 tried turning... First they started with a role-playing game property for Heavy Gear and Jovian Chronicles, which were effectively based on Armored Trooper Votoms and Mobile Suit Gundam. But they tried first as role-play properties with their Mechton system. Then they tried making them both into wargame systems. And again, they had the problem of they didn't have a large enough line of miniatures. They couldn't afford to put them into production. Nowadays, it would have been a lot easier. Make 3D models of the mechs, and you can, swap in and out armor bits and weapons just easy, and just real quick pose, print it out, boom, you got it, make a mold, good, going on to casting. But back then they had to hand sculpt everything. And it was a mech game in a time when Battletech had already moved 90% to computers, and FASA was dying. In fact, I believe it had actually died at this point. And someone else had the rights to Battletech. But mech games just weren't popular when they came out with these. Fortunately, they came out with a couple decent video games for Heavy Gear. And which now that's all anyone knows is the video games for Heavy Gear. A lot of the plot line, a lot of the lore, the plot, a whole lot of that is lost. Because it's only the video games. Well, it is 9:49. My throat's going to be dry from talking too much. So I will be having the audio up on the Thingiverse pretty soon. And 1 week from today, I will have the Necromancer Lord up on the Patreon file vault. So I'm going to be holding up my hand. I'm going to count from 5 to 1. And when I get to 1, it's going to be or no, it's going to be me saying something goofy and then So, soda first. Because I'm thirsty. I'm very, very thirsty. Okay. Excuse me. Now, let me hit F5 there. This is going to be a 5, 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1. A tabletop war game without a well-written book, good lore, and a nice line of miniatures cannot survive. Tabletop war game by Games Workshop that isn't Warhammer 40k can't survive for long. Bye-bye.